Hi, this is Zach with Worn & Wound. Today I'll be taking a look at the new Seagull 1963 42mm watch with a Panda dial. For those of you who know, the Seagull 1963 was a really successful reissue of the kind of somewhat famous pilot watch by the People's Republic of China from the 60s. The original was a 38mm, featured kind of a champagne colored dial, and they recently released this 42mm version with 3 different colors that you could choose from. One has black dial with silver subdials, one is the same kind of champagne color, and then this one with white and black subdials, which is commonly referred to as a Panda dial. So this watch features the Seagull ST19 manual wound column wheel chronograph movement. A domed acrylic crystal comes in at $469, which is also a price increase from the original 38mm. So let's take a closer look. The case of the Seagull 1963 42mm is very simple, very plain, but has some interesting elements going on to it as well. So as the name says, it's a 42mm diameter. Measures 48 millimeters lug to lug, 13 millimeters tall, and has a 22mm lug width. And clearly from the top, it has a very simple design, so just general circular central case, and then these fairly straight kind of fat lugs coming off of it. But when you look at it from the side, or actually really more down the center, you can get kind of a sense of what's interesting about it. So the case itself kind of flares up and out, and then has a concave side. And I actually don't know if I've seen this before in a watch, and it is interesting. It doesn't affect the overall appearance too much, but it is definitely a unique case shape. Looking at now from the side, you can see that it has this fairly large domed acrylic crystal, which kind of brings in the kind of vintage element from the 1963 watch. The original 38mm version originally came with acrylic, and now they've actually updated it to sapphire. So I was a little surprised to read that this is acrylic rather than sapphire, though a lot of people prefer the acrylic on these watches, myself included. You can see now the chrono pushers here in the crown. They're very kind of generic, simple pushers. The crown is unsigned, which also surprised me a little bit. The 38mm version does have a little bit of a logo on there. But in terms of the size and proportioning, it's like 5mm or 6mm by about 4mm deep. So it has a nice size to it. It's obviously easy to grasp. This is a hand winding movement, so you do need to be able to turn it. Flipping the watch over now, you can see the display case back, showing off the very attractive Seagull ST19 movement in there. Around the display window, you have various markings, some in Asian characters or Chinese characters here, and others just saying kind of the serial number and things of that nature. Overall, I think the 42mm case is really meant for those people who found the 38 too small. It's a much more modern size, and I think this is fairly well implemented in that it does keep some of the vintage elements going on. The dial of the 42mm is obviously very close to the original 1963 38mm, but this colorway, like I said, often referred to as a Panda dial. So that means it has a white background with black subdials, and it's actually pretty uncommon on watches that are available right now. This probably being one of the few, especially that are in the kind of affordable price range. And I think there's some very attractive elements to it. So there's this very small index going around the very outer edge, and that's really seconds index that you'd use for the chronograph when timing. And then, though you could also refer to it for minutes. And then there's an index of applied silver markers here, obviously showing the even hours and having triangles for the hours in between. I really like that the use of the applied markers here. It's something I liked about the original as well. Kind of, just add some depth, some texture, and almost a little bit of a, sort of a fancier element to this military-styled watch. Now looking at the writing on the dial, so you have 21 Zuan, that means 21 jewels. This movement apparently comes in 19 or 21 jewel versions. This one clearly has a 21 jewel. And then below there are Chinese characters here. And then there's the red star just below 12 with a silver outline, which is kind of the signature of this watch. So then you have these two large subdials. You have the chronograph 30-minute register at 3 and the active seconds at 9. They're pretty big subdials. One thing that's kind of funny, so the 42 millimeter version obviously is larger, so the dial becomes wider than it was on the 38. But since it's the same movement, the location of the subdials stay the same. So there's a little bit of a sense of these subdials being kind of close, a little too close to the center. And because it's kind of black on white, there's almost like, I felt that there was a little bit of almost a cross-eyed look to it, which is a little peculiar, a little funny. I think the balance might have been a little bit off on the expanding of the dial, but not too much so. Yeah, the hands here, very simple, kind of straightforward hands. You have, just kind of squared off, squared off silver hands for the hour and minute. They have a drop of lume in them. That's the only lume on the dial. It is pretty negligible. And then on the seconds and 30-minute subdial, you have these little silver hands. Honestly, in sunlight, they unfortunately get a little lost in the black. You can kind of not see them. I think they might have been better in white, or perhaps the 30-minute subregister could have matched in red to tie the chronograph functions. But of course, that's getting kind of picky. And then you have the chronograph seconds register here in a bright red. Just talking a little bit now about the Seagull ST19 movement. This is one of the few kind of very affordable mechanical chronographs on the market, if not the only. And it's becoming slowly but surely becoming a little bit more available as prices on the kind of the ETA Value 7750 are going up. And it's a cool movement that I'll show you how it works now. So you have the chronograph start here, start and stop and reset here. So I'll start that now. When you start it, has a pretty satisfying click. Obviously the second hand goes, and then it's just a a single register, or well rather the active seconds and the 30-minute sub register. There is no hour register on this. So you pause it to stop it, and sometimes I've actually noticed the second hand will jump back the tiniest bit. I don't know if that is specifically this watch, if it's the movement, an issue with that movement in general, but clearly it's not a super precision mechanical chronograph for that very reason. Now resetting it, you hit this button. I've noticed this does not have a very satisfying push to it, but it does have obviously instant snapback since it is a mechanical chronograph. Now flipping it over, one of the really nice things about this movement is really just how it looks. So this is actually a movement based on the Venus 175, which was a Swiss movement that I believe they sold the components of it, or the machines for to make it, to the Chinese in the early 60s when they were developing the original 1965. And then this is an evolution on it. So it's a really beautiful, elaborate movement. There's blued screws throughout. There's decorated bridges. One thing that actually makes this a particularly exceptional movement is that it is a column wheel chronograph. So right about here, you have a little column wheel, which is generally considered to be a more complicated version of a chronograph function, of a chronograph movement, more difficult to make. So when you flip this watch over, I think the magic really is more in looking at this than it is in the chronograph functions on the front side. Other things to note, so this version is 21 joule. It is obviously hand wound, as I said, and it beats at 21,600 vibrations per hour. On the wrist, the 42 millimeter version of the 1963, I think wears very well. I might have personally preferred the 38 millimeter because I happen to enjoy smaller watches, but it was smart of them to make this 42 millimeter size because I think this is much more acceptable to those who want larger watches, those with larger wrists, but they designed it in such a way as to not be oversized for somebody with a smaller wrist such as I have, which is 7 inches. And that's really because the lugs don't overhang, and just the general design doesn't feel, wild or really anything like that. So, as you can see, it's a very nice sporty military design. Obviously, this kind of panda dial isn't the typical 1963 look, so it's kind of unique and it has a definite vintage quality to it. It gets a great response from people, I have to say. People really like the panda design kind of thing, and I personally like it a lot too. It wears very comfortably also, just in general. I mean, 13 millimeters tall is very, is a very nice size. And I think, stylistically, like I said, it's a very easy daily wear watch. It's not overly aggressive in any way. It has some nice kind of decorative elements to it, and it's a definite conversation piece, so it's fun to wear. It comes on this kind of, honestly not the most exciting brown strap. It's 22 millimeters, and it's just, it's comfortable, it's fine. It's just a very kind of dull brown with brown stitching, but, it's a strap, so it's easy to change. And it doesn't look terrible with the watch. It just unto itself isn't super exciting. One thing I do think, though, is that honestly 22 millimeters might be a hair large for this. I feel like it kind of looks a little fat compared to the dial, whereas a 20 might have been a little bit more elegant. But once again, that's just getting very picky. The buckle it comes with is actually nice. It isn't signed in any way, but it's a kind of a thicker than usual buckle. And I just happen to note that it is like kind of a nicely constructed one. Yeah, so let's take a look at it now on another option. On a NATO, the Seagull 1963 42mm I think kind of comes to life a little bit more than on a brown strap. This is a kind of a khaki brown colored Maritac NATO 22mm, and I think it just, it's definitely a little bit more of an aggressive style, but the colors just kind of liven it up a little bit, and I think it makes it a little more fun. So personally, I probably prefer to wear it like this than on the kind of chocolate brown leather strap. But I think the watch would also look really, nice on maybe more of kind of an aviator pilot strap with a black leather and a white stitch, something like that. I think it is actually very versatile. Obviously, white and black kind of go with anything. But NATO is a great option. I'm sure, you could find many different other ways to wear it as well. To wrap up, the Seagull 1963 42mm, I think it's a really cool, addition to the Seagull 1963 line. Obviously, it's a little less, perhaps, authentic to the original watch from 1963, but I like that they opened up, different color options, and that they made this, larger size for people who were, probably really liked the watch, but were hesitant to get it because of the original 38mm size. At $469, I think it is obviously a great deal for a mechanical chronograph, though I'm not 100% sure if, it's really worth, the extra 4mm is really worth an extra $100. So, the pricing is a little funny, but it's overall still a good price. Perhaps the most interesting thing really is that, this is one of the few Panda watches out there, so I can see a couple different types of people really liking this. One are just, like I said, people who wanted a larger size 1963, and others are people who like this style and, simply can't get it in a modern watch. Yeah, so, overall very cool. Please read the full written review on Worn and Wound, and follow us on Instagram, Tumblr, Twitter, and Facebook.